Hello and welcome to part 2 of this 3D code overview. I did promise that we would make a cupcake, so we're just going to hop right into the sculpting room since this is the only room that we're going to be interested in for now. Your UI probably won't look the same as this, but I can't remember what the default was and I don't want to set it back to it. So if you hit the spacebar, you get this quick access, the quick access is the top. You get this I'm not sure what to call it. Maybe it is a quick access panel. Either way, spacebar is for this. And we just want to use a primitive to bring in for the base of our cupcake. Now there's a couple of ways that you can make this shape, and usually if you know what shape it is you're making, your best bet is to pick a primitive that is the closest match. Obviously, kind of goes without saying. So we could do something like this and apply that into the scene, and then use something like a build brush, or carve, or clay. All of these will work the same. I'll use the build brush, and my alpha at the moment is set to this one, so it's this kind of triangulated but with a smooth tangent. And if we wanted, we could enable with the S key, you can bring up this symmetry window. So we can enable symmetry, but we want to be using a radial symmetry feature, which is a really nice feature. So I'll bump that up to say 32, and already you should be able to tell that it's, you should be able to tell what it will do. So for the cupcake, we just want to be drawing into the mesh here. So I will hold down Control to do an invert action, because if I were to just draw normally, it will paint on top. It will paint out. I want to paint in. Paint is probably not the right word. Sculpt. Sculpt's what I'm looking for. Sculpt's what we're doing. So you can increase the strength and the diameter by holding down the right click, I suppose it is. I'm using a Wacom pen, but I'm pretty sure that's the right click. So I can hold Control and I can just bring that down like that, which isn't the best. Maybe I want more strength. It's pretty ugly looking, but you get the idea. We could do something like that. But as I was mentioning earlier, with the I'm just going to clear this. The idea behind picking a primitive that is as close as possible to the mesh that you want, we can just go ahead and use this gear or cog tool. I guess it's a gear tool. So we will bring in the hull radius. I do want to disable symmetry, otherwise it's going to bring in 32 of these all around the place, and it will just, if you can see that, it will create a bit of a mess. You can still import this into voxels, it won't care. Surface mode, it will probably throw an absolute fit and crash on you. Surface mode will be fine, but either way we don't want that shape, so I'll turn symmetry off. And we want more teeth, so we'll go with 32, which seems to be the maximum. It's a bit strange that you can't have any more than that. I'll hit this button. That's a weird way to say button, bitten. Oh, I'll hit that to go into an orthographic mode, so I can just see it from this angle. I want the sharpness to be very pointy, and you'll notice that it's created not on these X and Z grid lines as the points. I don't know if that changed. I mean, this won't make any sense, but changing the values to try and match. If it's not obvious what I'm doing now, it will be obvious in the next video when it comes to doing the retopo and the texture. But essentially I want the midpoints to match up on the grid. So for now, just by eye, I'm going to rotate it. It's a shame that by default it doesn't come in like that. Maybe they'll change it. So that's that. I'll come out of orthographic into perspective. So we'll do this, and I'll just apply that into the scene. And so that's it's pretty low res actually. I'm going to increase my resolution by hitting this res plus button down here. So now my layer is 2 times. In fact, maybe I'd want 4 times. So I'll do that, and I'll hit apply. And there's my cupcake. And so now I'm at 517,000. So I can click on any tool to drop out of the that tool, and that's a lot better. While we're here, I'll show you a quick little cool little thing. We won't be using it, but we'll do it anyway. I'm going to hit duplicate to duplicate this layer, and it will automatically move you into the transform tool. So we'll just use that. So I'll bring this guy up a bit, maybe scale him in. Actually, I don't need to scale him in. We're going to do a Boolean operation to cut this piece out of the other. And if we were using a traditional polygonal based sculpting package, this could cause some issues. It might not work out exactly what's what, and it could end up just crashing or not letting you do it. But with voxels, I'm just going to show you that it really doesn't care. So there's two ways to do this, I think. One is you can right click the layer, and down at the bottom here you have all of these options. And so we would say, I think at least we'd say subtract from volume 4, which is this layer, which I will rename to base. So we could do that, but I prefer to just use the hotkey commands. So there's two that I only ever use, which is Shift and Control. Shift will merge a layer, Control will subtract the layer that you're moving from the other layer. And the way that you do that is when you hover over a layer, you get this little move icon right there over to the right. So when you see that, hit Control, and I'm going to move this over that layer there, and almost instantly it's just cut out, and that's pretty cool. Just wanted to show you that. There's no need for it. We're not actually doing that, so I'm going to undo, and I'm going to get rid of this. So there's our base. And there's nothing else that we really need to do to that for now. So I'm going to create a new layer here, and we'll call this one cake, and primitives. And again, by the logic of going off of the shape, which is the closest to what we want, sphere, it seems like an obvious choice. So I'll just put that in there. And let's see, I think I'll use the pose tool to get the initial shape sorted. I was going to hop into the move tool with symmetry. I'll still use the symmetry. I'll change it from radial symmetry to XYZ mirror. And again, it's just the S key to bring up that window, and when you hover out, it disappears, which I prefer. You can, if you want, dock it, but I just prefer it to be there when I need it. So I'm going to use X and Z. So again, I'm not using radial symmetry for this. And on my pose tool that I clicked on, the default is the line mode, which is the one that we're going to use. I'll cover these others in other videos as and when I need to use them. For now, we only need the line, so I'm only going to use the line. So I'll do something like this. And because I'm using the X and Z symmetry, I know that all of these are going to be scaling in the same amount. So I'm going to bring this up like that, which you might think looks completely wrong, but I'm going to drop out of this tool, and I'm going to use the transform tool to just scale the whole cupcake up. Let's put it to center mass for a second, and then move it down, scale it in a bit. I do want a bit of overlap there, not too much. And so now I will swap to the move tool, and I will just switch to a different material for now. Ignore that warning. Just so I can see what's intersecting and what isn't a little bit better. Also, I'm in orthographics, so I'll get out of that. And because I'm working with the symmetry, I only need to focus on one corner, and it will just obviously mirror across. I'm going to hide the symmetry planes for now. I'll bring back my default material. Oh, I can't remember which was default, doesn't matter. So still with the symmetry enabled and still with the move tool, we're going to start flattening this cupcake out a bit, because I want to put frosting on the top. Okay, I may have deflated it a bit too much, but that doesn't matter. So we'll move on to the frosting. And like with anything, there's a couple of ways we could do this. Depending on what you wanted, following that same rule of, let me just disable symmetry, following that same rule of whatever shape you want, get the primitive that's closest. We could start with something like a sphere, add this in, use radial symmetry to carve into it. Something maybe 16. Oh, radial symmetry is not on. There we go. I forgot to tick it on. So you can do something like this if you wanted. And that might be all you need. I want my frosting to be a little more random. So I'll clear that. And I'm going to use a great tool, which is the carve tool. I'll disable my symmetry. The nice thing about the carve tool is it allows you to paint mesh over the surface of other meshes. So that's just on top of that, which is neat. I'll undo that for now. So I'm just going to lay down some random kind of stuff. I'll speed up the video, so we'll be back when it's done. Okay, that should do it. And I'm dealing with quite a low triangle count here. I will increase that, but I'm going to smooth it first, because if you smooth with a lower density, let me bring that down a bit. If you smooth with a lower density mesh, it makes smoothing a lot easier, because if you think about smoothing, it's just relaxing the triangles. So if your mesh doesn't have too many triangles, then the smoothing is typically a lot faster. So that's looking pretty blobby. And now I want to just move some of this down. It's a bit, in fact, maybe radial symmetry can help me here. This isn't a symmetrical model, but by the size of my brush and as I'm grabbing it, should do a pretty good job of grabbing everything. And now I'll turn it off to just focus on a couple of little weird areas. Something like that, and switch back to the build. And I will use radial symmetry again, actually. As I was saying, this isn't a symmetrical model, so as I'm doing this, it will hit some areas and not others, but it could create quite a nice effect in that we still get these same twirly lines, but it's not mathematically correct, which I don't want it to be. I'll smooth that out at the top. Okay, so I'm going to disable that, and we'll put in a couple of manual strokes, I think. Increase the strength, lower the radius, just to try and peak it out a bit. If I hold shift and tap on the background, I can move my light source around. You can also, if you want to, tap this icon twice, and I believe it changes the lighting so that it always follows you, but I don't prefer that. I like to have my lights static when I'm working, and then if I need to move them, I'll move them. This is pretty good. I'll just flatten that out. I say it's pretty good, it's looking pretty messy. Should have just stuck with the sphere and the radial symmetry. That was looking pretty tidy. Now I've kind of got this blobby mess, but maybe you want a blobby mess. last time I made cupcakes, it was a blobby mess, so you could argue that this is true to life. You could keep working on this, adding in sort of peaks and dips. For the sake of time, I'm not going to. But nothing that I've shown you, wait, I think that's the wrong way around. Everything that I've just shown you is pretty much the tools that you would use. I mean, you can interchange with box clay and build and whatnot. They're all relatively similar. Just kind of have to try them out and see what they do. So we're going to move on to the sprinkles. And for this, if you have a models tab, or if you don't, it'll be somewhere up in Windows, pop-ups. Somewhere in here is the models menu. I have a custom folder which you can just create by adding a folder there, and in here, oh, I seem to have two of them. Let me get rid of one. I have just a sprinkler mesh that I'd made before, and when you click on a mesh here, it brings up this option to import it, and we want to be using the on brush system. And let me scale that down a bit. And I've already got this set up with the yaw and the pitch, so that every time I move, it jitters around, so I can just sort of add it into the scene. I might need to increase. I definitely need to increase my resolution on that layer, because sometimes it's not even importing because it's so small. Voxels cares a bit about scale, but we'll discuss that in another video. So let me show you first of all how you can make your own mesh, and it's very simple. So we'll just start with essentially the exact same thing that I did when I did my sprinkles. So let's increase the resolution of this because we do want it to be visible. So we've added in our sprinkle mesh, and ideally we want to change the transform a bit because the pivot of this is, well, it's up there for some bizarre reason. So we'll do to center mass, and then we'll just click this X here to reset the space. So now when we create our mesh, its pivot will be in the center, and the mesh is root of the world. Everything's fine and dandy. And to make your own mesh, it is really just simple. With the move layer, again, like you can't move a layer until you're hovering over this right bit. But with that, we just drop this over here into the new. A window will pop up asking you how much you want to reduce the triangle count by, which makes sense because oftentimes the models here are for scattering around things. So you don't want to be scattering around a model that's made up of millions of triangles. So it has this reduction %. And for the case of a sprinkle, you'd probably want to keep it pretty low. And you hit OK, and bada bing, bada boom, there's your sprinkle. So we already have one though. So let me clear this layer. And we'll unhide this stuff. And so making sure that we are on the sprinkles layer. And with the on brush and with the jitter yaw set to 180, we don't actually need that to be 180. And the pitch probably doesn't. So the only thing I've changed here is the jitter yaw, because that just happened to be the correct rotation. Yours might be different. You might need to do a jitter on the pitch or the roll. It depends on the angle, the orientation of your object. So I'm going to speed up the video now as I just kind of go through here. And actually I'm going to res up again. There we go, that's a bit better. Yeah, so I'm going to speed through the video as I do this because you don't need to watch me doing it. Okay, so that'll do for the sprinkles, and I am also going to put this inside the frosting layer, which you can do by moving the layer and then hovering over the plus of the layer that you want to parent it with. So now these two are combined but still separate. That's, you know, parenting. And so while I'm in here, I will make a new layer, and I'm going to call this one beads. You know those weird metal but somehow edible candy sweet things that you often get on cupcakes or baked goods? I hate them myself, but for texturing they'll look nice. Well, either way, we're going to make some of those, and we could just do the same way that we've done it before. So by default, we could just get a sphere model using the on brush and placing it all around. But I mean, while that's completely fine, there is also a sphere tool in the menu, and it will create a sphere the size of your brush, which is pretty neat. And you can also draw with it outside of the model, so not just across the surface, but along open space. It's a handy tool. It's great for doing 3D concepts. So I'm just going to lay down a couple of these. I'll res plus the layer again. So I'll be back when this is done. Okay, that's pretty much it. There is nothing left more for the sculpting. I know in my overview I had like a fork or something in there. Honestly, there's not much point in going through that. I think you should be able to work out how to make it yourself. I mean, not that I will do it, but you know, just use the box primitive and the pose tool, and that'll be it basically. So yeah, in the next video we're going to be hopping over to the retopper room, where we're going to be doing the low poly asset, and I love the retopper room. It's my favorite room. I love how 3D Coat handles all of this, plus the UVs. So yeah, if you like this video, or if you didn't like this video, please just stick around and watch the next one anyway. Yeah, thanks for watching.